Hello. Our story begins at the edge of the Chancellor's office. Mace Windu was expressing that the Chancellor was too dangerous to be kept alive. The history of Jedi and Sith had finally come to one moment, a decision that would decide the fate of both religions. Mace towered over the Sith Lord, who simply put on an act. Just as Mace had on Geonosis, he could feel everything moments before they happened. In his journal, he spoke extensively about his regrets at Geonosis. He wished he had struck down Count Dooku and taken the blaster that would have killed him from Jango. It would have been one solitary moment to define the course of galactic history. From his position, it felt that, without Dooku, the Clone War would have never gotten the headway needed to turn into a full galactic-scale conflict. Windu in this moment knew what the implications of fighting Palpatine were, and he understood the political effects of killing him and what they might be as well. The Jedi would be seen in a bad light by the Senate, but it would be a necessary decision. As Obi-Wan told Anakin earlier, the allegiance of the Jedi was to the Senate, not its leader, one who had managed to stay in power long past his term's expiration. Windu lifted his lightsaber up and felt a swift change in the Force. He couldn't believe it. Anakin had changed his stance, from exposing the Sith Lord to the Jedi Master of the Order, to following him and then betraying him. It was a sin, a show of their hubris. Palpatine saw the look in Anakin's eyes, and it all happened in slow motion. Mace couldn't react fast enough to defend himself, but he could, with true balance and harmony with the Force, ensure the destruction of the Sith. Anakin's lightsaber ignited as he cried out and ripped Mace's hand off of his body. The amethyst lightsaber was launched from the window and thrown across the city. Mace used his other hand and gripped Palpatine as electricity fled the Sith Lord's hands. He yelled out in pride as he tried to launch the Jedi Master from the window, but as he used all of his power to pour electricity onto the Jedi Master, he was pulled out with him. Anakin watched in horror as his lightsaber dropped out of his hand, and he watched Mace Windu and Darth Sidious get lobbed across the city and out the window. Mace's grip was strong enough to get Palpatine to fall with him. Anakin ran to the edge of the window, watching lightning covering their bodies as they descended to the surface of the city. Anakin panicked. He didn't know what to do. What was he supposed to do to help? Watch? His body was still, and he couldn't move. He grabbed his hair. Without Palpatine to coax him further into the dark side, he stood confused and unable to move. He realized upon his action that it was the wrong one. Anakin remembered how he felt after killing Dooku, and how wrong that felt. The exact same thing happened right here. He learned from killing Dooku and how ironic it felt. Palpatine should have been the one to be killed. The words were the exact same, and that was so confusing about it. It was like Palpatine knew what Windu would say. The only thing Anakin could really come to grips with was the final words Mace said: "He's too dangerous to be kept alive." Inside the city streets of Coruscant, Mace and Palpatine were able to use the Force to stop their fall. But when they realized what had happened, they quickly tried to find another way to kill each other. Mace obviously had to grapple with the betrayal of Anakin, but that would have to wait. He turned over and saw Palpatine raising his hands, calling Mace Jedi scum. The Jedi Master rolled out of the way as electricity charged out of his fingers and blasted the ground. Mace ducked behind a dumpster before using the Force to lob it at the Sith Lord. Without their lightsabers, they were reliant on Force powers, and Mace knew from what he had seen he was outclassed in ability to wield the Force. He used the Force to launch the dumpster at Palpatine, who rolled away and searched for Windu. Before he could find him, a spear landed right at his feet. It wasn't an actual spear, but a pipe ripped off the wall, and it was sharp. Palpatine happened to get lucky again, turning around and jumping up a building and firing electricity at Mace again, who was able to jump through a window to avoid strikes from the Emperor. Above the city, Anakin could see the lightning, and panic filled his body. What exactly was he supposed to do here? He grabbed his lightsaber off the ground and pondered before running to the vessel he arrived in. Mace jumped from his building over to Palpatine's, and with the lid of a trash can, jumped up and smacked Palpatine in the head with it. He fell backwards and braced himself as he landed on the ground. Palpatine scowled as he lowered both of his hands and created a Force storm, one of which Mace jumped right into. The Dark Lord and the Jedi Master were engaged again in a contest. Palpatine was able to use the Force to keep the Jedi Master away from him. Mace threw his fist at the Sith, but their contest of the Force was unmatchable. Mace Windu then saw something, a chance to tip the scales into his corner. He knew that against the Force, it would be Sidious's battle to win, so he willingly gave over control of the battlefield to Sidious. Windu was thrown backwards and slammed into a wall, before ducking another blast of lightning. He was still struggling with the missing hand. When he was throwing punches at Sidious, he was throwing bare skin at the Sith Lord without even realizing that he was doing that. Mace used the Force to bring a pillar down, which stalled Palpatine just enough for Windu to force crush a couple pipes, but then he held the grip over them. He didn't release it. Palpatine came around the corner and looked to the Jedi Master, calling him a fool. This fight would be his last. Sidious stopped as a force storm rolled above their heads, tornado-like clouds encircling them and spiraling up into the sky. Anakin could see it as he landed just outside and prepared to move in, knowing where his loyalties truly lay. Mace remained focused, not giving Palpatine an ounce of leverage. The Sith Lord could see that Mace was trying to be stoic, and after having spent years hating the Jedi Master of the Order, he could end it right here and right now. Lightning fled his fingers, and Mace released his grip on the pipes and threw his hands forward, unleashing a wave of water, built up from containing all of its pressure inside the pipes. As lightning met water, Palpatine felt a shock find his way back to his hands, and he stumbled. The wave of water was sending a shock back through him, and he wasn't able to resist it. Like bathing with a toaster, Palpatine was bathing with 20, and the electricity was coming from him. He cried out in agony as he was electrocuted by his own hands. He fell to his knees and he looked forward, and with his last breath, he saw the failure of the Sith looking him in the eyes. After even turning the Chosen One against the Jedi, he couldn't secure his own victory. Palpatine's eyes moved from Mace's missing hand and then over to his eyes, and all there was for him was certainty. Palpatine's body fell backwards and Mace lowered his guard. He took a deep breath as a puddle of water started to form around his legs. He moved out of it and closed his eyes. He felt a bit of peace. His greatest failure, the one he experienced on Geonosis, was now over. This could begin to make things right. As Mace lowered his guard, he felt Anakin run around the corner of the building, stepping past the broken pieces of the pillar. Skywalker looked at Palpatine's dead body and over to Mace, whose eyes were still closed. Anakin's hand was on his lightsaber, but he didn't place it there because of Mace. He held it there in case he was attacked by either Palpatine or Mace when it came here. When the Jedi Master felt Anakin looking at him, his eyes opened, and Anakin was jarred, stepping back before even having a second to react. Windu launched his hands forward and sent a shockwave through the ground, throwing Anakin from his feet and through the wall behind him. Without a weapon, Mace was on his own, and he didn't trust Anakin at all anymore. It was such a shame too. Their relationship had always been rocky, but as Mace said during his journal entries, he fully believed that Anakin would bring balance to the Force. Trusting him, on the other hand, was a different story. He readied himself, unsure of how Anakin would approach the situation. Skywalker wasn't sure what to do either. He climbed out of the rubble and brushed his shoulders as he looked for Mace, who had vanished. Anakin called out his name and told him he didn't want to fight. A voice echoed out over the streets telling him that if he didn't want to fight, then he should have allowed him to handle everything. Mace stood tall from the wreckage of the pillar and told him that he had made a terrible mistake. If Mace didn't react by pulling Palpatine out of the window, then what would Anakin be doing right now? Anakin looked confusedly at Mace, trying to figure out what to say. Mace frustratedly looked down and told Anakin that they needed an excuse for this death. How could they explain what happened here? Before they could come up with an actual excuse, a couple people came out and asked what happened, mentioning that they couldn't see anything. All they saw was lightning and a storm of clouds. Mace turned over to Anakin, who nodded his head. The Jedi Master expressed that the Chancellor was a warlock. He used mystical powers that the Jedi hadn't ever seen before, killing 3 of their colleagues. Anakin nodded his head, expressing that Mace accidentally force-pushed him into a wall. The Chancellor was able to multiply himself into different entities, which is why he reacted the way he did. The people were confused, but Mace stepped forward, pointing down with his missing hand and telling them that this was his true form. They showed up to stop him after learning that he intended to control the government. The people were all shocked, but it was less about the words said and more about the disgustingly subhuman look that Palpatine had. Mace understood that going to the Senate and saying the same thing wouldn't work. Plus, there were a couple other personal issues with Anakin now. As a Jedi, he wouldn't harbor desire for revenge, but Anakin still attacked him without true provocation, especially due to the whole Palpatine being a Sith thing. Mace turned to Anakin and told him to return to the temple and send Sinjalak and Shakti. They were going to clean this mess up. Anakin abided, and without the security inside the temple, he decided that he could go to the archives, so it was a win-win for him. It was late at night by this point as it was, and he had a trick up his sleeve. Before going into the city to find Mace and Palpatine, he robbed the archive passkey off of Master Fisto's dead body. As a result, the young Jedi could sneak into the restricted section of the archives, unbothered. Sindralik, Shakti, and Commander Fox were sent to the scene of the crime. The scene where the sorcerer used electricity and a Jedi Master defended himself with water. Mace spent hours trying to clear citizens away from the location. Police forces got to Mace before the Temple Guard and Coruscant Guard could. Everyone quickly got together as Fox and the Temple Guard tried to understand the situation. As the most loyal to Palpatine clone in the Grand Army, Fox wanted every answer he could get. but Jedi General Mace Windu outranked him, and he told him everything there was to know about the situation. Despite Windu being a part of the crime scene, shocked, he was discreetly sent up to the Chancellor's office to make sure everything was dealt with. The bodies of the fallen Jedi would be taken away from the office and back to the temple. At the same time, Grand Inquisitor, the temple guard that was instructed to betray the Jedi upon the activation of Order 66, was left without an escape. He was very frustrated. Mace, despite dealing with Fox, Syndralic, and Coruscant investigators, could feel the feelings of anger from one of the Jedi in the unit. It didn't make sense, but Windu believed that there was a plot that went deeper than manipulating Skywalker. As he was dealing with each of these individuals, a medic was stationed to help him, as they were connecting a new hand to his body and helping him maneuver it. Mace didn't really care about the hand, but the medic insisted on doing it now, so that they could go and do the next mission. The argument between Fox, Syndralic, and Windu was where Palpatine's body should be taken. The Jedi expressed that he needed to go to the temple for diagnosis, and Fox wasn't having that because Palpatine was the Chancellor. His diagnosis needed to be run by personal doctors. That was fine and all, but the sorcery that was used, depicted by the eyewitness accounts, only gave the Jedi even more reason to bring Palpatine to the temple. It was a nasty situation to deal with, and Mace was frustrated. He had an entire plan of operation for what he was going to do inside the Chancellor's office. He had a whole frame of reference on how he could accuse Palpatine of being evil and turn it into the Senate and the whole thing after that. In a way, this actually could be easier. In a way, it also could be much more difficult for him and the Jedi to deal with. Mace spoke extensively with the eyewitnesses. They said that because it was so dark, they weren't able to see much. They heard a big crash, saw someone dart behind a dumpster before using the Force to throw it. After that, it was a light show, and the cloud that covered everything kept them from seeing everything else. With Mace outranking Fox, he was able to get Palpatine's body escorted back to the temple. Syndralic offered a medium ground, allowing Fox to escort the body with 10 of his best men. It would give them a fair chance to conduct a study of the body and see what was really happening and what kind of sorcery they were dealing with here. All the while, inside the Jedi Temple, Anakin moved through the archives. Jocasta knew had gone to sleep, and the other archivists were fixing up some of the shelves behind the main desk. There were some important documents that needed to be redone, so that's what they were doing. Anakin walked around the back side of the archives as he slipped around to the restricted section of the archives. He felt the chain code and read the braille on the code. He turned back and saw one of the archivists ducking behind the desk and doing who knows what. Anakin raised his hood over his head and twisted his hand and watched the restricted section as it opened up. Despite the archives being really accessible to any master, ever since the Palm Krell incident, the Council decided to lock everything down, just in case there was another case like Krell. The Council was worried that more of their masters could become obsessed with the information inside the archives in the pursuit of victory. So Council members had special chain codes, and a whole other process was done for other Jedi Masters throughout the temple to make sure they were loyal enough to get in without potentially damaging themselves or others. Anakin felt the lock flip as the doors opened. His eyes moved back and his head tilted over to see that it was clear as he slid into the room. The doors closed behind him and he smiled. He stepped forward and looked at the massive cubes of information. Within each cube, there were miniature drawers that led to a bundle of topic-related secrets. Anakin knew what he was looking for. As he told Palpatine, there were secrets of the Force that the Jedi were not telling him. If Plagueis the Wise could influence the midichlorians to create life or elongate his own life, then it had to be possible for him to do the same with Padme. Anakin scoured the archives for what felt like hours. His hand traced each cube and read the words on the exterior of each of them. He would find what he was looking for. It was around here somewhere. Anakin climbed to the top of these cubes and scanned everything he could. What didn't make this any better was his anxiety. His heart rate was accelerated as he rapidly searched for answers to immortality or even Force heal. The sad thing is that while these abilities were readily available within the restricted sections, the Jedi put them closer to the back of the archives. They weren't forbidden per se, but it was encouraged to allow the will of the Force to partake. If the Jedi were too focused on saving their attachments, then they might lose out on the important things in the galaxy. The Jedi understood these powers early on during their history. Its secrets were housed within the first books written about the Jedi Code and the lessons it followed. But the Jedi had misinterpreted pieces of their code, and perhaps they misinterpreted more of it than they were willing to admit. Anakin started to get frustrated as he searched every document and found nothing. As he stopped for a moment to look around and see if he could get a better perspective, he got angry. The Jedi clearly didn't know the secrets to saving people. He never should have trusted Windu. He should have gone with Palpatine. It was such a mistake. If he saved Palpatine, he'd be closer to understanding the secrets. Anakin hit his hand against one of the cubes and a holocron fell on the ground and cracked open. Anakin looked down and picked it up, as a hologram popped out. The room grew darker as it did. and on it he saw a Jedi Master, one he did not recognize. Anakin's eyes scanned the hologram as the individual informed whoever was listening that the Force was strong with them. It was their guide, and it was the will of the Force that they were here to listen to this lesson. The Jedi sat down after bowing and requested that the listener do the same. He spoke with a deep tone, one that felt as comforting as the bass in some of the local cantina club music. Anakin settled his mind and closed his eyes as he listened to the individual who began instructing the young Jedi on how to use the power of Beam of Light. It was something not used since long before the Old Republic, and the years before the establishment of the Galactic Republic, Jedi Masters used the power to destroy fleets of space pirates that were subjugating worlds in the early alliance of the Mid-Rim. It was only 4 or 5 systems, but the Jedi protected them. Regardless, Anakin felt at harmony for a moment. It gave him peace of mind and heart, and while he was trying to learn the Force heal or whatever it was that Palpatine said, it was the fact that the Jedi Master on the hologram spoke to him so directly. It was almost like he was living in the moment, speaking over a communication device rather than a historical recorder. Outside the restricted section of the archives, Master Windu and Commander Fox walked into the medical bay at the Jedi Temple. The medical droids got to work on Palpatine, revealing everything they could about this sorcerer. Fox didn't leave his side, just to make sure the Jedi didn't do anything. But they did a blood scan, proving that Palpatine was imbued with thousands of midichlorians. His M count was higher than most people within the temple. The only exception was Anakin. Mace watched Fox's reaction. He didn't have a physical reaction to see, due to wearing a helmet, but he understood what the commander was feeling. There was a sense of dread and confusion. While these emotions were swirling through him, a Jedi ran into the room and informed Mace that Anakin got into the Jedi archives. The archivist's assistant expressed that they didn't think it was a bad thing, but he wasn't sure if a Jedi Knight was permitted in there or not. Mace told them to go in there and get him out. He wasn't technically permitted. The Jedi nodded as he moved out of the room. As they did, Mace turned back and asked Commander Fox if they could report this information to the Senate, and how he would like to do it as a Jedi Master. Without Yoda, the Council would have to work in unison with Master Windu's word. His job as Master of the Order was to defend the Order and protect the interests of it. He understood Yoda's as well as the Council's positions on this stuff, so he could guide the Order in the proper direction with the absence of the Grand Master. Fox listened as Mace told him that the Jedi could temporarily take control over the Senate and bring the war to an end. They would be able to, from there, conduct an investigation into the rest of the Senate to ensure that there were no more sorcerers controlling powerful roles inside the Senate. The Jedi obviously knew what Sidious was, but they framed him in such a light that made the clones fear him. The citizens of the galaxy as well as the clones would be understanding of the Jedi if they worked against a figure in control over the galaxy that could hide themselves from the Jedi themselves. For decades, the Jedi had lost their favorability within the Senate, and in Mace's mind, this would be the perfect way for them to counter such distrust. With the fear of something evil in control, the Jedi could frame Palpatine as the mastermind behind not just the Clone Wars, but the fall of Dooku and the Separatist movement. In this scenario, if it worked, they could implement the changes they believed were necessary. Windu did clock that this type of action could be seen as unwarranted and even as a hostile takeover, so treading in this direction could be very challenging for the Order, especially since they were basically gaslighting the galaxy to believe that Palpatine was a wizard, not a Sith. So Mace would consider the true implications of going forward with it in the coming hours. For the time being, Sindralik was out informing the press about what actually happened, but expressing very little details of the event. He said that there was a scuffle in the Chancellor's office. More news would be available by the Master of the Order in the near future. The people were worried about what happened, and the eyewitness reports on the ground level of the event were being kept silent for the time being. There would be a revelation, but the Jedi had to plan it out. Anakin was disrupted from his hologram by the archivist's assistant, and he went to hide. Because the individual didn't see him, he left to inform Windu again. Anakin was a little frustrated, because his mind had been taken off the hologram that was actually helping him, but at least he could get back to what it was he was supposed to be doing. He placed the holocron back into the cube and continued searching. With Windu being informed that Anakin was missing, Mace decided to investigate it himself. Skywalker looked at a cube and found information he was looking for. He pulled 3 holocrons out and gently moved his hand across them, feeling each of the secrets they held. Anakin smiled as he found the one. As he was doing this, he didn't hear the door open, and so as he connected to the holocron, there was a voice behind him, one that called him by name and asked what he was doing in here. Anakin turned around. They really hadn't talked about the entire incident from before. Anakin saw his chance to get into the archives as a way out, so he wouldn't have to deal with this entire situation. Now that Windu was here, he considered the possibility of going back on that and making an entire situation out of this. Mace looked at him blankly, waiting for his answer, and Skywalker told him that Palpatine spoke about immortality. Not for himself, but for another, and he was curious if the Jedi could actually do it. Palpatine seemed to think they couldn't. Mace didn't believe this for a second. He was aware that Anakin was afraid of a death, and it was a big reason why he insisted on Anakin remaining in the council chambers. He did it as a tactical play, knowing how confused Anakin's heart was. It was the best decision to keep him safe during the confusing time. It was now clearer than ever before that this was why. Mace still didn't trust Anakin, but he trusted that these were his motivations. It was clear that he was in here because of this, so what exactly else was there to say? Mace wanted Anakin to explain everything honestly, and maybe they could begin rebuilding their bond, or lack thereof. As Anakin prepared to speak, a golden lightsaber ignited, and Mace Windu looked down. Shock filled his face as he turned back to see a temple guard standing behind him. Mace fell to his knees and dropped over, falling lifelessly to the ground. The man that would have been called Grand Inquisitor was here for revenge. His promised role in the new empire was taken from him, and he was going to either kill Anakin or make him out to be the bad guy. He had been waiting inside the archives, and when Mace walked in, he knew this would be the perfect way to expose everything and make Anakin look like a true villain. The second blade on the temple guard staff ignited, as he told Anakin that he would die for taking his future away from him. Skywalker slowly got up and ignited his own lightsaber, and Skywalker stepped forward. The temple guard steadily stepped back as he blocked each strike from Anakin. Skywalker punched the helmet off the temple guard before kicking him into the wall. His back slammed into the corner of the wall as he wheezed, and blocked a strike before their lightsabers collided with the walls inside the tunnel out of the archives. Once they exited the restricted section, the few inside the archive chambers turned their attention towards the duel. Grand Inquisitor called out for reinforcements, telling people that Anakin had betrayed Mace Windu. The Master of the Order was dead. Without even flinching, Anakin shoved Grand Inquisitor over and pushed a lightsaber close to his neck. Their blades were interlocked again, and Grand Inquisitor could feel his strength breaking. He kicked Skywalker in the knee and leapt up to the table, taking the high ground and blocking Anakin's aggressive strikes. The guard jumped over Anakin, who blocked and shoved his lightsaber towards his face. Using Tricata, Grand Inquisitor stepped back and ignited his lightsaber in front of Anakin's face. Instead of hitting him, Anakin used the Force and creased his face as he held him at bay with the Force before dragging his own blade back and splitting the pike into pieces. The temple guard kept a hold of his edge of the blade as Anakin gripped the other one in mid-air, igniting it and swinging it at Grand Inquisitor. He stumbled, and as he did, more temple guards funneled into the room. Anakin blocked one strike while bringing the yellow lightsaber around and cutting the backside of Grand Inquisitor's leg, before Anakin took his blade and drove it into Grand Inquisitor's chest. He looked at his opponent as shock filled his face, the same shock that Mace had on his face before his death moments before. Anakin turned around before he could express his innocence. He was blasted with a stun round and was completely knocked out. At face value, the Jedi had to accept that Anakin was behind the attack. For the time being, Shaak Ti and Sindralik would share the lead role of the Jedi Order, being that Shaak Ti was a surviving member of the Council, the only other one aside from Coleman Kaj on Coruscant, and Sindralik as Battle Master was a great addition to her leadership. With Sindralik dealing on the more investigative side of things, Yoda was contacted and discreetly transported back to Coruscant from Kashyyyk. While this was happening, Shaak Ti confronted Anakin about everything. He told her what happened and how he wasn't responsible for it. He did admit that he snuck into the archives using Kit Fisto's chain code, but he didn't do it for wrong. He was just trying to protect someone he thought was going to die. Anakin explained the entire scenario, and while Shaak Ti could be understanding, as a master on the council and temporary co-leader of this operation, she needed to do what was best for the Order for the time being, which meant that Anakin would remain restrained for a little while. The needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few, in this case, Anakin. A little while ended up becoming a couple days for him. Yoda did stop by to get his perspective, but the Jedi were moving quickly to secure control over the Senate. They explained everything that happened, with the very little information they had from Mace and Anakin before Mace's death and Anakin's capture. Yoda ended up doing exactly what Mace was going to do, which was a temporary capture of the Senate and suspending their powers until the war was won. Even though the Republic didn't know where the Separatist Council went, they made their position apparent by moving a Trade Federation battlecruiser to their system to defend it because Palpatine never contacted them again. This allowed Obi-Wan to bounce from Utapau to Mustafar to capture and round up the Separatist loyalists. In the meantime, with conclusive evidence and a council of jurors, one that was not made up of High Council members, the Jedi were able to come up with a decision for Skywalker. They, with the help of security footage, were able to diagnose that Anakin did break the rules of accessing the restricted section, especially with the harsher rules in the wartime era. However, despite this mistake on his part, he was not at fault for the death of Master Windu. Due to the fact that Mace was no longer alive, no one knew what really happened that night, aside from Anakin. So with an audience of Shaak Ti, Yoda, Sindralic, and Coleman Kaj, he would tell them what happened that fateful night. Anakin went to the executive building because he felt a change in the Force. When he arrived, Windu had defeated Sidious, but his arrival caused a distraction, allowing Sidious to cut Mace's hand off before electrocuting him. In a gut reaction, Mace was able to save the galaxy by yanking Palpatine out the window with him. Anakin didn't say anything about the decision to enter the archives, but expressed that he would step down from the Jedi Order to live out his life with his partner. The Jedi were very genuinely surprised by this choice, but it did sound like Anakin. By the time Anakin got out of his miniature jail time, he was able to get to his wife, who had already by this point given birth. She was obviously worried about him, but Yoda had spoken to her about everything, since he was constantly within the Senate and around her peers. When Anakin got to Padme, they were both overjoyed with the prospect of having twins. With 2 children, as a free person for the first time, husband and wife named their children and began their new life. Padme did have her issues with the Jedi takeover of the Senate, but she was more focused on other things by the time they got control over it. With the Separatist Council captured, the Republic could begin dismantling the Separatist war machine. The Senate had their reservations about the Jedi presence, but with the Separatists losing almost overnight, they were able to come to a resolution with the Jedi. There was a 12-month plan for the Jedi to give all control back over to the Senate. The Jedi would remove all representatives of the Separatist warmongering companies, as well as stripping power from the monopolized power in the galaxy. The Senate would be checked for all and any other Force sensitives, especially individuals related to Palpatine or supporting his movement. The Jedi's first act was the no M count requirement. Due to how high Palpatine's M count was, they believed it'd be a good idea to make a maximum M count requirement. If a senator and or chancellor had more than 3,000, they would not be permitted to remain in the Senate. The Jedi also labeled Palpatine as a warlock of the dark. Obviously, as a Sith, he wouldn't have as much of an emotional reaction from the public. There were old rules that outlawed the Sith from existing, but like most other sentients, their minds were feeble. The past could be repeated, so this could be the extra step to ensure that the government could never be infiltrated again by the Sith. This was meant from the perspective of both Jedi and maybe even future Sith. There would still be pockets of fighting from the CIS, but it would be in part to the Jedi generals that they could destroy the CIS forces. By the time the CIS was fully extinguished, both in military and in government, the Jedi would step back from the Republic and allow the normal processes to take place. With Maul having been captured in the Siege of Mandalore, the Sith were done for. Their stench would never plague the galaxy again. The Jedi would be interested in Anakin's children, and Yoda would offer his guidance, not as a Master Jedi, but as a friend. He always wanted what was best for Anakin, and if he could be of assistance, then he would do it. In his mind, this would be the way to do it. While the Jedi were aware of the children, the only Jedi to remain around Anakin would be Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Ahsoka after she rejoined the Order. It was a little weird considering the fact that Anakin left and she rejoined, but she found a great joy for her decision. Luke and Leia would grow up in a warm household, one without the Jedi or the Senate dictating their lives. Padme and Anakin decided to remain on Coruscant for the time being, with sporadic visits to Naboo to visit the family. They would learn the Force, but their futures would be theirs to decide. Once the Jedi were gone from the Senate, a new era of prosperity began, one that spread across the entire galaxy in the decades that followed. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Alexandra Reese, The Beginning and End, Django Fat Clone, Nick5098, INTJ Recluse, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galavic Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granity Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewa670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tam, Johnny Nguyen, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Galaxy 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Photos Legacy Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, The Man 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button. Let's talk about this story. With this story, I wanted to kind of take the play on Anakin still going forward with the motion, but Palpatine and Mace having the end of their fight. I do think that Palpatine would win in a fight and contest of the Force. I think it literally just is his arrogance that gets the best of him. It gets the best of him both times in the saga. I kind of wanted to leave this edge for the conflict between Anakin and Mace, where they don't actually get to resolve their tension. And so it kind of becomes a little bit like what you see in Acolyte, where perspective really changes everything for you. It's Anakin's perspective that the entire Republic bases everything off of. Mace didn't do anything wrong, and Anakin also didn't do anything wrong, and that's how they perceive the entire thing. I wanted that tension between Anakin and Mace to be completely disrupted by Grand Inquisitor acting on revenge, and a revenge that almost forced Anakin to go the wrong Jedi arc like Ahsoka had, but he doesn't end up getting the same treatment she got. He gets to choose his own path. So I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.